Hey guys, Terry Red here, and in this video, I am continuing my hopefully last Future Pinball and BAM Essentials All-in-One video series. This one's covering the Frequently Asked Questions and Help Guide. This is the one video that I hope you guys never have to watch, and the one guide I hope you never have to read, but it's there to hopefully answer the most commonly asked questions or deal with the most common issues that you may run into when running Future Pinball. Now, before you should even be coming to this video, you should have gone through the very first one, which is the install guide, which will get you the latest Future Pinball and BAM Essentials All-in-One package, which is a complete install Future Pinball, the latest BAM update, the latest BAM OpenVR update, my guides now fully updated and in PDF format now, and extra tools and apps, the example table, and the extra batch files, just all the stuff that's included with that should get you up and going and ready to go so that you don't even have to use this video. But once you've done all that, and if you're having problems, then you can come back to this video and start reading through and seeing if you can solve your problem. So yeah, make sure you do that first and make sure you follow it. It doesn't actually take long. Don't let the length of the video throw you off. The actual install literally is just minutes, guys. But I cover all the content within this thing, and it's a lot of stuff, So do that first, then come back to this video. Okay, guys, so basically all I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of go through and address some of the common questions and maybe show you where the solutions can be resolved or whatever else. So yeah, it's not. And also don't forget about the other guides that I have included in the Setup and Guides folder. And, these may address any issues you have that you may not be aware of. So just don't forget about those other guides and the other videos that I've made to go along with those guides. All right, so the debug mode. So this is the one thing a lot of people aren't aware of. Basically, you can run Future Pinball in a debug mode that will have a whole bunch of information shown in the top left corner. Basically, as long as the table has extra code added to give this information, then you'll see it. But otherwise, it's only what the table has supported that it's going to show on there. Now, PinEvent tables give you a ton of information about everything on startup. What options are enabled, what version of BAM you have, are you using global settings, what PuP-Pack is being run, or what type of pup stream settings you may or may not have. All sorts of things, but it depends on the table you're running. And if a table uses the all-in-one example code, well, then a lot of my code from my PinEvent releases, I added to that example code as well. So they will also have some code that may be helpful to let you know what's working, what's detected, what's not detected, all that kind of stuff. So the majority of regular Future Pinball tables do not have this, so just so that you're aware. So basically, using the debugger, it's pretty easy. You just start up Future Pinball, but you have to do it from the editor. You can't do it from a front end, and you load a table, and then you don't click Play Table. You have to go to here and either Play Table, Debug Window, or you can push F9. And then it's just going to load and run the table like normal. The only difference is you'll have the debug window there the whole time. Yeah, so this is something you can't enable, in regular mode. Like, you can't just play the table and hit F9 and have it pop up. It doesn't work that way, unfortunately. That would have been very handy if it did do that. All right, so I have the sound on the table turned all the way down. So you can see on the top left, a bunch of information showing up, and it's some. Now, don't worry if you were trying to read something and all of a sudden, boom, something else comes up and you didn't get a chance. All of the info on the debug mode is written to a text file, so that way you can exit the table and then go through the text file and see exactly what's going on. And I'll show you that afterwards. But yeah, you can see. So you can see it showed a lot of startup info. And then while you're playing the game, you know, it's going to show you different things like SSF sounds, what's being hit, what physics materials are being hit, you know, all sorts of stuff. So it just can be helpful, mostly for table creators, but it can be helpful for you guys as well. Okay? And there we go. See, like for example, it showed the ball rolling sound, you know, like what was or wasn't working, when a ball was created, when a ball was destroyed, all sorts of stuff. So now when you exit, and if you exit Future Pinball, I'm always making sure that you guys understand you need to close Future Pinball completely before loading another table or starting the same table again. You do that every time, you'll probably eliminate like 3/4 of your problems right there. Okay? Now, for the debug mode after you've ran it, so what you do is you go to the folder where your table file was, which should be in the tables folder. Again, if you keep all your tables within the tables folder, within the Future Pinball folder, that'll eliminate a lot of problems right there as well. So what you do is you look for the FP debug text log, and if you look at that, there you go. It shows everything that was going on that you may not have gotten to see. So you can see what version of BAM, what version of FizX this table has, what profile it's using for the FizX settings. It shows that it found my PinEvent settings file. So therefore, it's using the settings from that file to apply to the table. It verified that what kind of PuP-Pack or what PuP-Pack you're using, and therefore it's telling you, okay, it's going to start using this particular PuP-Pack. If it didn't find the right one, it would tell you, and it would not load the PuP-Pack. It's telling you what option the PuP-Pack is using, you know, and then it's telling you, okay, you're in desktop mode, so those are the settings we're using. PUP SSF, you know, Future Pinball, PuPDMD, PupStream, DOF, night mode, you know, all the different settings it's going through. And then it gets to the point where then PupStream starts up and it tells you exactly what options are being used for that. So as you can see, a lot of helpful info just on the table startup, which would solve a lot of problems if you don't know what's working or what's not working. All right, so very, very important that you guys are familiar with this if having problems. All right. All right. So startup problems. So I'm not going to go through this whole thing, but when it comes to having startup issues, first and foremost, you needed to go through and make sure you installed the Future Pinball BAM Essentials all in one, and you needed to make sure that the zip file that you downloaded was not blocked by Windows. A lot of people don't check that, don't take that extra step. You know, you basically have to right-click the zip file, go to Properties, and make sure it's not blocked before you install it. If you don't do that, then you may have a bunch of blocked files and will have issues, okay? Every file you download from the internet, you should be in the habit of doing that. It's just going to save you a lot of hassle, all right? So assuming you've done that, then if you're having a problem, especially with PinEvent tables particularly, then you want to try to do these orders to narrow down problems. So the idea here is that you want to make sure you're not, running anything as admin. Nothing should be run as admin. Only the first time. Only the first time you'll run BAM as admin when you're first setting up. But that's the only time you should ever run anything as administrator. If you need to run things as administrator to get things to work, then that's a Windows security problem that's blocking or causing issues. It's not Future Pinball itself, right? So the idea is that you're going to disable Windows Defender, possibly disable PinEvent settings, so you can narrow down where the problem is. Because you may have a DOF related problem, which I'll address. You may have a PUP related problem, and you're narrowing down which one is causing the table to not load. All right, that's the bottom line of what this process is. So you shouldn't have to come to this, but if you do, if you're just not sure what's going on, go through this process and see what's going on. Just disable PinEvent stuff first. If the table works, great. If the table doesn't work, then you got to go from there. All right. Now, here's the big one, startup errors. Okay, I tried to collect some of the more common ones. So, here, I'll just make this bigger. It's easier to read that way. All right, so pinball meditation errors, and you can get a lot of them. Now, the problem here is because we're with BAM, Future Pinball, BAM is an add-on program for Future Pinball because Future Pinball, the core program, hasn't been updated for like 13 years, but BAM is a program that runs on top of Future Pinball. So if there are errors in the code or errors elsewhere, sometimes Future Pinball doesn't know what the heck's going on, and it gives an error that may not match the actual problem that's going on, and it's a little confusing. So usually when you get errors, something along these lines, you have to make sure that your Visual C Plus updates are installed. If you did the Essentials package, that's part of doing that, and that's it. What I'm saying right here. You have to make sure you have the correct Future Pinball and video and editor settings. The ones I show you have to be used. It's not an option because some tables will not run if you don't use the correct settings and they will give errors. So it's extremely important that you follow what I'm telling you guys, okay? You do that, you'll have very few problems. And then make sure, of course, you're running BAM. Because a lot of people will try running the Future Pinball EXE and you don't do that because then the newer tables, which use BAM features, won't work because Future Pinball has no idea what the heck's going on, and it doesn't have BAM running. All right. Now this one is a more recent one I've been seeing. So if you get this error, FSO along the lines here. So this is basically because COM extensions is turned off. I've had this happen where I had a crash or a power outage of my computer, and then when I went to run Future Pinball again, this setting was reset to being basically off. And when that happens, it stops, especially PinEvent tables, from working correctly, and you'll get this, this error. So basically, I'll try to demonstrate that as best as I can. I'll see if I can recreate the error. Maybe I can't, but I'm just gonna load up the blank table real quick to change a setting. I'm probably going to be doing this throughout this whole video, so kind of get used to this, guys. So the place where you resolve that is you bring up the BAM menu, and then you go to plugins and COM extensions. So if you have the error, it's usually because it's on off, which is it's actually supposed to be paranoid, not paranoid. So if it's set like that, and then you try to run a PinEvent table, then it will most likely give you that error. So I'll just see if I can recreate it. So I'll try running Sonic again, and let's just see if that happens. Because this one threw me for a loop when I finally saw it. Because I saw a couple other people have it, and they're like, they just did a reinstall of the settings and BAM, and then they were good to go after that. But I'm like, yeah, but there's something else going on, and finally I was able to have the error pop up on me. So yeah, let's just see if I can get it to happen. So we'll see. There. Well, okay. So not the same error in this case, but this is what caused the error. Okay. So I'll turn that down. So this is a good example. So because I had that disabled, it wasn't able to do some other features as part of the PUP setup, right? So let's just try putting that back. Now it has to be safe as a minimum, okay? You can put it all the way up to the same as VPX, but I put it on safe as a minimum. If you're not sure, you can do this. Some tables might actually even require this setting. So if in doubt, you can just do this, okay? So all you got to do is go into, even if you got a table error, you just go into the BAM menu, and then you just exit the BAM menu. Don't exit Future Pinball. You have to exit the BAM menu in order for those settings to be saved. All right. A lot of people do that. They'll go in, they'll make the change, and then they'll hit escape, and they don't realize, well, your settings weren't saved, right? Because that's it even says so. See, note current table settings are saved automatically and loaded each time you restart. So, but you have to exit the BAM menu first. All right. That saves it automatically. So I'm going to escape now, always close Future Pinball and then rerun it again. So let's take a look here. Again, if you do that every time, close Future Pinball after exiting for any reason, whether it's you're done playing and you want to play another table, or you wanted to make a change to the table script, or you had an error, any error pop up, close Future Pinball, restart it, and then you'll have almost, I would say almost all your problems eliminated by doing that. And we'll come across other things as well that will relate to that. And there you go. You can see it's working just fine now. All right. Okay. The PinEvent. Okay, so sometimes you'll get it where it can't find your PinEvent settings file. Now, normally this shouldn't be an issue, but I've seen some people have this problem. It's usually security related on your PC. Something on your PC is blocking access to that file, or maybe your file structure is weird, or maybe the location you have Future Pinball installed is kind of being blocked by Windows in some ways, but not others. Bottom line is it's not allowing Future Pinball to find that external file and use it for some reason. Don't ask me why. It's probably because of the commands I use to look for that file that are being more restricted. So if you do have that problem and you cannot resolve it, because there's nothing to do on the Future Pinball end that's causing that, it's something on your system that's causing that problem and restricting that. So if that's the case, the only other option you have is to to use PinEvent custom settings on each table. It's the only way I've found to solve that problem for anyone who has that problem and they can't get it resolved. So basically you go into the table script and then you come down to PinEvent custom settings and you set this to true. So what that's going to do is it's going to bypass looking for this file, which is our global settings file for PinEvent. So it's trying to find this file, but for some reason your PC is not allowing it to happen. So if you can't resolve the error on your PC's end, it's not a Future Pinball problem, then setting this to true, you just do that, just like it tells you here, and then that's going to bypass it trying to look for that file, and then it's going to use these settings instead, and then you'll just have to do the settings based on what you need for PinEvent on your system directly in the table script instead. Okay, and you'll have to do that for each table. Unfortunately, there's no way around it. There's nothing else I can do. You gotta sort the issue out on your end. And I just noticed I got a spelling mistake. Oh, I hate when that happens. So yeah, so that's it. That's the only solution I know of currently. So yeah. Oh, this is okay. So this was an interesting one. Now this is one I can't show you on this video, but this is if you get some kind of crazy error, and you might not even be able to see all this text, but something along the lines of this, and public key token, the assembly was compiled for a different processor. So if you're getting that on a PinEvent table or a table that used the all-in-one example code to add FizX and everything else, most likely the problem is DUF related, because you probably did an update to Visual Pinball for 64-bit, and respectfully, that whole process is a bit of a mixed up nightmare, because that update is not separate for DUF, as in like DUF, the 64-bit update is kind of mixed with the 32-bit update instead of it being its own standalone thing. And when a lot of people do that update, they register the 64-bit version of DUF, which messes up the 32-bit version, is the bottom line. So what happens is, sure, Visual Pinball will still work, but then anything that's 32-bit, which would be FX3, FX2, Future Pinball, DOF links, or maybe anything else that used 32-bit DOF is no longer going to work because it screwed everything up, is the bottom line. So If you get an error like this, that's what that's talking about. You messed up your 64-bit DUF update as part of your Visual Pinball 64-bit update. So, uh, basically, the solution here, and I'm not going to go through it in this video, but follow through what they're telling you here, is you got to basically fix it in the registry, is what you got to do. And you read through this, it tells you exactly the problem, and the solution is in here in the registry and what you need to look for. And you go through that. And thank you, Cadorna, who posted this problem or this solution on VP forums, because without this, man, like like a lot of people were, when they updated Visual Pinball to 64-bit, they didn't realize that was causing the problem with Future Pinball, and they were all of a sudden like, my Future Pinball stuff ain't working, or I finally tried Future Pinball and it's not working, and blah blah blah. And it's like, well, the problem isn't Future Pinball, the problem was Visual Pinball, and you messed something up and you got to fix it. Well, thank God this guy found a solution. So yeah, you got to go through this to fix the problem. So yeah, thank God we found that one. That's a big headache for me, because it messes up every PinEvent table, that had DOF enabled. Now the way to find out if it was DOF was you disabled DOF. Now the table's working just fine. So yeah, that was a big pain in the butt. All right, so table crashes after it loads or starts. Now this is a very generic one. It could be a lot of things that's going on. Unfortunately, there's no easy way to narrow it down, but a very common issue a lot of people have is I don't know how to pronounce it, the Nahimic driver, or some of its software. It's basically a sound enhancement type driver or software that some computers may have installed. It causes problems not just for Future Pinball, but lots of games as well. So it's a common issue. So a lot of people either have to disable the driver or some of its processes that it has running. So basically, do a Google on how to disable this thing, and once you do that, you'll probably have no problems after that. So yeah, I've never had it, so I've never had to deal with it. But so many people said that was their problem, because they had issues with other games as well. So yeah, and then as usual, always close Future Pinball completely, because that will make sure you're starting Future Pinball fresh. Because if you start Future Pinball over and over again without closing it, then you run out of RAM, and then it causes glitches, and then eventually it will crash. So just make sure you follow those procedures, or maybe you enabled PuP-Stream in PinEvent V2 settings, and PuP-Stream won't work for everyone, and it may cause a crash. So double check that. Disable PuP-Stream. It's disabled by default, but that may be causing your problem. Okay. Now I don't see this one very often, but this used to be an issue if people had the wrong settings in Future Pinball video settings. So that's not as common anymore. Okay, so this is a very common one that annoys the living crap out of me. So this is when they didn't follow my instructions at the bottom line. They didn't install my BAM cabinet settings files, which would have solved this problem. But basically, this is the Future Pinball HUD that's meant for desktop that's being displayed while you're in cabinet view. Now, you could disable this in the BAM menu, no problem, after the fact, and that's what I'll show you in this video. But yeah, if you install my BAM settings files, and I'll show you what I'm talking about here. If you installed these BAM settings files for cabinet, if you copied these and pasted them into your BAM folder, that would have solved the problem. That would have solved a lot of problems, actually, if you actually did that. And if a lot of people either never did it, or they did it, but then they were playing in desktop mode and they forgot, oh, now I'm running in cabinet mode, I have to change the settings now. And that, so that's, it's one of those things that you kind of have to pick one or the other to avoid a lot of problems. So that would have helped you out there. But I'll just show you exactly how that works. So let's say you're playing in arcade mode, okay? And you go to play in cabinet mode. Excuse me. And then the table loads up, and you have that ugly ass HUD that's showing up. Well, it wasn't meant for cabinet mode. Is the bottom line, and there's no way to make it look correct because it wasn't intended for this view. So luckily, BAM Rav Arcade added an option to always keep them hidden, so you can do this at any time just in case. There are other options, but I would not recommend doing that. So now, oh well, okay. See, that's another error you'll have coming up that we can address. But so let's say you're in cabinet mode, okay, and you have the ugly HUD popping up. Well, the way to get rid of that is you go to add-ons, and then you go down to, where are we here? I can't say. There it is. Hide overlays. You just change that to always, okay, and then you just leave it set on. And for every table in cabinet view, that will turn that off. If you have it on game start, it's only going to do it at the beginning of the game, but you may have other ones that pop on and off that will then appear later on in the game. So you always want to have it on always. And again, that's just for the cabinet views. All right. And this is another one you'll come across later as well. That if you again didn't install my cabinet files, and you didn't have my cabinet settings files, and you didn't have Force Arcade mode enabled, then you'll get this kind of view instead of the normal cabinet view. All right. So, like I said, installing those cabinet files would solve a lot of problems. Now, the other thing you're seeing right now is all these white textures and other stuff like that. On rare occasion, when you load up Future Pinball and run it like normal, if you see that, it's just a weird memory glitch. So just exit Future Pinball completely and reload it again. Don't overthink it. It rarely happens, but it sometimes will. I have OBS going in the background, so that's probably why that probably happened. So, yeah. So, bottom line is, that's how you get rid of that. And the Future Pinball watermark, well, that's quick and easy. Here, I'll just go back here. So, the Future Pinball watermark. So, basically, I'll show you where you... Oh, actually, I got to put that back. Well, I don't have to, but I will. Don't want this video showing everything sideways. All right. Like the first two telltales that I know someone didn't follow my instructions and install my settings files is if the watermark on the bottom right is still there. Now you notice it just faded away. So that means the settings are enabled. But if you didn't have the setting enabled, you'd have to go to add-ons. And then you'd have to go to down here, hide Future Pinball logo. Because if it's off, then it's still appearing. Okay, because in the old days, people would use hacked versions of the Future Pinball executable to get rid of that logo. But you don't need any of that crap with BAM. You don't use any of that anymore. You use the normal, original, unmodified versions of Future Pinball. The only thing that you'll ever have modified is when you install my package. It'll be patched for 4 GB access. But that's not hacking the file. That's just a Windows thing to allow it to use extra RAM. So yeah, you just turn this on and then it fades out. And that's it. Again, if you installed my desktop settings for desktop view, or if you are using cabinet view, again, yeah, you're going to see this a lot. For VR or desktop or cabinet, just copy these settings to the right location. So for cabinet and desktop, you're going to install those into the BAM folder, and that takes care of a lot of these settings automatically for you. All right? All right, so in cabinet view, the POV of the table looks horrible or stretched. Same thing. If you install my cabinet settings files, that gives you a proper view to start from the beginning for all tables. And then if you get a PinEvent table, well then I include a config file that will give you a proper POV, and you have to make sure you install that config file in the BAM config folder in here, just like Sonic, right? Now, a lot of people will be like, oh, wait a minute. They look in here like, oh, yeah, I already installed that file. And it's like, well, no, maybe you didn't. because what BAM does is it looks for any file in there, and if there's no file in there, it will then look at this default config file, use those settings, and then create a config for the table in here based on that. So if you didn't have my BAM settings files copied to begin with, which is this default config file, then you won't get a proper POV for any table if you did as well, if you didn't also copy this to get the perfect one, right? So bottom line is always install the files I tell you to, guys. They actually matter, okay? It's not hard. And the funny thing is, Visual Pinball is actually going down this route now with the newer updates, that they're trying to make the POV and everything all separate, and the table won't be doing that at all, so that's something that, you guys are going to have to start getting used to. All right, so yeah, if you're someone who's in a cabinet view and you get what looks like a full single screen view instead of like the cabinet view, well, I showed you that earlier, which was the Force Arcade BAM's Force Arcade mode in the BAM menu. So just make sure you have that enabled, and then that will fix this and make it look more like cabinet view. Now, some people actually do want this view. Some people actually like it, but if you're using a regular multi-screen cabinet view, then you need to go into the BAM menu and have Force Arcade mode enabled. And that will only happen if you have the Future Pinball Backbox settings disabled. So, for example, I'll show you. So, if you run Future Pinball and you have these settings enabled, like this guy and this guy, then you won't get this view, but you still want to have Force Arcade mode enabled. How do you solve that? Easy. You install my BAM settings files for cabinet, damn it. So there you go. That'll solve your problem. All right, now some of this stuff is not a problem. Some of them are just questions. Do new Future Pinball tables look better than old tables? Well, that will depend on the table, right? My table updates, my PinEvent table updates, yes, they will, because I update either older tables or I do create my own that will use updated modern BAM features for newer lighting, newer shadows, newer RayCast Ball Shadows, shadow maps, and then I create it and update it in a very specific way to make use of all that, because it's not enough just to run BAM. You have to actually update the table, the entire table, to make it look the way they do with how I make them look. And some other people are starting to learn how to do that. But yeah, bottom line is PinEvent tables for sure. Other tables maybe, maybe not. It depends on the person who updated the table. Same thing with Visual Pinball. Like you'll have some new Visual Pinball tables that are like from VPW that are Blender Toolkit ones that look absolutely stunning, but then you'll have regular Visual Pinball tables that they still look nice, but they're not anywhere close to as good looking as a Blender Toolkit table. So it's the same idea on Future Pinball. No different. And game doesn't look as nice as a video demo as well, then you got to make sure you use the settings I tell you to in all the guides and install instructions I include. Bottom line. Ball stutter and non-smooth gameplay. Well, okay, so bottom line with this one is run Future Pinball full screen instead of windowed if you're having that kind of a problem, if possible. Pretty much everyone should be, unless you're wanting to run PuP-Packs on a single screen desktop setup and you're trying to make that work. But beyond that, you shouldn't have to be running it in windowed, unless you've got a multi-screen cabinet setup and you've got a G-Sync issue going on. Your playfield screen and your backbox screen use a different refresh rate, and sometimes that can cause a problem. So if you're running a PinEvent table with a PuP-Pack, well, you're disabling the backbox screen anyway, so that usually solves that problem. But if you're running a regular Future Pinball table where you have to have the backbox displayed, sometimes that's a problem because the different refresh rates mess things up. So the only way to get around that is to set the backbox into windowed mode, and that's beyond the scope of this video. I included options for that in tools and other apps in here to try to run the backbox into windowed mode. But again, that's something you'd have to control from your front end and make sure all that works, and that's beyond the scope of this. But yeah. Also, RayCast Ball Shadows. If your PC is not fast enough, then you need to disable that for PinEvent tables and table options. You have to disable that first, and then go into the BAM menu and disable it. Okay, very important. A lot of people miss that. So what we're talking about here is you have to go into here and table options, and you have to disable RayCast Shadows, this guy right here. Okay, all my table releases will have this enabled by default. So you have to set this to false. You have to save the table, and then when you run the table, you still have to disable it. So I'm going to show you where to do that. All right. And I know this is kind of taking a while, guys, but you know what? I mean, it's better that I actually show you, instead of having to make you guys go through the process yourself, which is why I'm doing this video. All right, so bring her up. Come on, man. All right. So once the table's loaded up, you go to add-ons, and you go to config ball and shadows. And there you go. So you can see, in this case, it was turned on, even though the table script had it turned off. The reason why is because this setting gets saved in the BAM config file. And because I ran this already once, even though I turned it off in the table script, the BAM config file had it shown as enabled. So any table can enable RayCast Ball Shadows. So if you had this enabled either by you doing it, or by being enabled by default, or by the table script enabling it, you have to come in here and make sure that you turn it off after you disabled it in the table script. Okay, very important. And then when you run the table, now the ball shadows will be off, and because you've updated the table script to permanently keep those disabled, now you can see they're not being used now. Okay, there you go. Very important. A lot of people miss that. Okay. All right. So disable reflection. So this is a big one. So those are the two things I highly recommend: disable reflections and disable raycast. So to disable reflections, they're talking about this one here, playfield reflections, and you can also do mirror playfield into the ball as well. That might help. So these two are usually the first two I would disable. So you just, disable both of them, hit OK, and then run the table. Now, I want to point out that if you're using my batch files here, okay, reflections are enabled in each and every one of these except for VR. VR disables them because it's very demanding for VR, and very few people have a fast PC to handle that. So basically, you have to make sure whatever one of these you're using, if you're using these, you have to go into it, edit it, because it's just a batch file, and then you look for settings that affect performance, and the three are your reflections, ball mirrors, and anti-aliasing. So you basically have to just make sure that you set it to 0, and for the ball mirror, set that to 0. Anti-aliasing, that's up to you. It's either going to be 2, 4, or 6. And then when you're done, you click save, and then the next time you run this, then it'll make those settings changed for you automatically. You don't have to come in here and do it. So the idea is that if you have some tables that are more demanding than others, you can make a copy of this that says desktop, and then desktop, and make a copy that says desktop, no reflections. So that's the idea, is that with these batch files, you can run Future Pinball without a front end, and be able to change settings as needed. Like let's say you have one table, I don't know, Star Wars, Death Star Assault Galactic Edition, that just does not run well for you. Well, then you could have a batch file that will disable the reflections for only that table, for example. You know what I mean? So that's why I made these batch files, to help you guys out. So, but remember, they will change the settings. That's because you can change the settings in here, right? And then run it, and then normally that would be fine. But if you use this batch file instead of running FP Loader, well, then that batch file is still making the changes, whether you close Future Pinball or not. It doesn't matter. So you have to double check that if you're using those batch files. All right, so Reduce anti-aliasing we just talked about. So disable SSAO. Okay, so that's one that a lot of people miss. Here, I'll just close this and then redo it again. So that's one that, well, by default it shouldn't even be on, but some people go through the band menu and tinker and stuff like that, but they don't know for sure what's what. So I'm just going to show you where that's located. So SSAO, or self-shaded ambient occlusion, it's a way of making things look a little nicer with extra shadows. So basically you go to you go to plugins, and you basically go through until you get to post FX, and then it's going to be in here. Now see, by default it's on off, but if you turn it on, now you can see, if you look on the table, you can see shadows coming on. And that's another thing too, like they may not look great, depending on the table. So you may not even want them on. Now, if they're on the highest setting, they actually look nice. But it's just like it is with normal AAA PC games, SSAO is demanding on your GPU. So if the table's not running smooth and you have this enabled, that might be a reason why. And this is a global setting. It affects all tables. So if it's on for every table. So you have to either have it on or off. So I recommend keeping it off, just as a good habit, because it may not even look great for some tables, and it's very demanding. So just keep that in mind. And while I'm here, if you have Bloom enabled, it may not look great on some tables. Honestly, I keep it off because it affects everything, not just the table, but the HUD. It affects everything, and it just doesn't look that great. So I recommend both of those being off. All right. And that's about it for that part. Well, the cool real-time shadows. So I just talked about that. That's the RayCast shadows. So same menu that we were at before. You can enable them per table in the band menu, but PinEvent tables also have that enabled in the table script. So make sure you deal with both of those on PinEvent tables. Okay, well, we had this earlier. Table loads and I see white squares on the playfield. So bottom line is just exit Future Pinball completely and then reload it again. And make sure you're using the video settings that I show you. Especially, in particular, this one here. Load images. Make sure that's disabled. Because if you don't, it's going to load textures into RAM in the editor, and then when you play the table, it's used up more RAM, and for some tables that will cause problems. It could cause some tables to actually possibly crash, so just make sure that's not enabled. That's only meant for like people creating tables. It's not meant for people just playing them, okay? All right, so when you play EM tables, the EM score reels never stop or keep rolling. Yeah, that's where you have to have vertical sync enabled. Everyone should have vertical sync enabled. The only time you don't have that enabled is if you're playing in VR and you can't make your monitor refresh rate match the VR refresh rate. That's the only time you should have vsync disabled on Future Pinball, because you have to in that instance to make it work smooth, right? But otherwise, vsync always, always, always enabled. And all these batch files has vsync enabled, except for the VR one, okay? And that's this guy right here. Should always have that enabled. The only one that doesn't is the VR one. And if you look, when you edit it, if you go down here, you'll look for vertical sync right here. And you can see, oh, actually, I have it turned on because I forgot about that. I have it turned on because that's how I actually make mine work with the proper refresh rate on my monitor and in VR, because I have a high refresh rate screen that I'm using. So by default, this has vsync disabled. So just keep that in mind. So if you have that problem with EM reels or other goofy things, things that seem to play too fast, like videos or other stuff on your Backbox or on the HUD, that's because of vertical sync being disabled. So just make sure it's enabled, guys. Some band plugins won't show up, like SSAO or the high score plugin menu. That's because you don't have your Visual C Plus runtime enabled. So that's talking about. Let's go here, because that's a lot of people will not realize that, but they don't have all of their Visual C++ updates installed. They'll have some, but not all of them. Uh, and it won't necessarily stop the tables from running, but when you go into plugins, some of these, like COM extensions, might not show up. This might not show up. This definitely won't show up if you don't have the right ones installed. So that's why I'm very particular about making sure everyone installs all of them. And if you're not sure, go into setup and guides, install guide, and it's in here. Visual C runtimes all in one, and then you just install that by right clicking and running as admin. And you should have done that as part of the part 1 install setup. All right, so that's what that's all about. Very important. And not just for Future Pinball, for lots of programs. Because a lot of programs need those, and Windows 10 doesn't include them. Windows 11 definitely doesn't include them. So everyone on every PC should have those installed. All right, so Future Pinball's back class won't display on the display number I set for it. Well, that's a bigger problem altogether, and I did cover that before. That's probably the most confusing thing on Future Pinball. So the bottom line is Future Pinball has support for 2 displays, one for your main display and one for your back box. And because of Windows being Windows, it's very confusing for a lot of people, because what happens is, and actually my setup's a good example. So what they're talking about is, if you enable the back box and arcade mode, so you want to run this on a multi-screen cabinet for normal Future Pinball tables, not PinEvent tables, the display number for the back box and for the playfield may not match what shows in Windows, right? So what they're talking about is, if you go in here, so this is my setup, for example. This is my playfield. This is what I have. So this is my playfield, but it's number 3. Whereas here, it shows it as number 1. This is my back box, whereas here, it shows it as number 2. So it can be very confusing. You might even get display 5 and 6 in Future Pinball. The bottom line is Windows gets confused, and then because Windows gets confused, Future Pinball gets confused. So usually what it tries to do is the first number here tries to take up whatever your main playfield monitor is. The whatever one is set for this, right? So you always want to make sure you have your playfield as the first one with this as primary. The back box screen has to be to the right, or Future Pinball won't work right no matter what you set. It just gets really confused. And then try your best. All you can do is try each one until you get the one that works. What I recommend doing is disabling both of these, and then try every one until you get the playfield working correctly. Then enable the back box, and then try whatever ones and see if you can get that to work correctly. And make sure the resolution is correct. Like in my case, I have 1920 by 1080. A lot of people do not have that correctly set. You have to select back box and then separately set these. So make sure you do that. If you're having real problems getting that to work, it just isn't working for whatever reason, then I do have a tool in here that may help. So reset monitor IDs. So you could read the info here that tells you about it, which is what I'm talking about right now. You run this batch file, and what that batch file does is it basically erases these settings from the registry. And these are basically your generic, settings for this to enumerate which is which in Windows. So when you run that batch file, it erases those settings, and you unplug your monitors, reboot Windows, have only your playfield monitor plugged in, and then one by one plug in the next one, and then plug in the next one, and then go back into Future Pinball and try it again. If that still doesn't work, then you have to erase your settings in the Future Pinball registry. Sometimes erasing this one and erasing this one and then going through that process again, or erasing the entire Future Pinball settings completely in the registry and then redoing the settings afterward. I've had that happen rare occasion where I had to do that. because Windows just confused things so badly that Future Pinball couldn't resolve it. So yeah, it's very confusing. So yeah, bottom line is try each one, make sure they're set up correctly, and if that works, great. If it doesn't, then you may have to go through the process of the batch file, and if that doesn't work, then you may have to erase your settings in the registry, and then do this as well, reboot, and then redo your settings in Future Pinball afterward. It's a pain in the butt, but it's Windows. What else can I say, man? Like, and Visual Pinball has similar problems sometimes. You know, like sometimes it gets equally confused, and it's a real pain in the butt to sort sometimes. It's because Future Pinball uses two full screen windows, and it's the only program I've ever seen that does that. So it really confuses things sometimes. How do I change the Future Pinball back glass to fit my screen better or get rid of the grill? Well, that's in the BAM menu. Again, you have to have these settings enabled, and then uh, here, okay, I don't have to do that, but I can show you this way. So basically, you just go into the BAM menu, and then you do the settings from there. So basically, you would work your way to. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, it should be. Hold on. Why is that not showing? It should be showing up. Hold on a second. I'm trying to remember now. Is it because of this? Okay, that should still be showing up. Hold on. I'm a little confused now. Hold on a second here. Why I'm not getting the option? All right, I'm gonna exit this. Let's tech channel or tech video. So that should be showing. Not sure why it's not. So I'm gonna try it again. Oh, not that one. Hold on. All right, so I'll try running this to make sure it's working correctly, and let's try it again and see if it shows up. I didn't see the Backbox menu showing up, so I wanted to make sure that's working correctly. I'm not sure why it's not showing up, though. Interesting. Why are you not showing up? Oh, maybe it's because... Hold on. That should... Oh, it's there. Okay, it is there. Okay. I was being a dum-dum. Never mind. So ignore that first part. So you have to basically go into the table. I thought it was going to be in here, but it's in table and lighting. So basically make your way to the Backbox menu but you have to have the arcade mode and the Backbox enabled in Future Pinball's video settings for it to work, okay? Or this won't show up, is the bottom line. And then you go in here and then you can change things manually, or you can have it auto stretch. There's a whole bunch of options. You can't see the Backbox right now because it's on my second screen, but this is where you make those changes. Okay? All right, so now I can undo everything I did before. All right, and you notice when I disabled that, that's because we have the Backbox settings still enabled, the arcade mode, okay? So that's because we have these guys still enabled. So, yeah. That's what you have to do. You have to go in there. Jeez. Okay. All right. Do new tables play better than older Future Pinball tables? The answer, yes. A couple years ago, not really. But today, if you have a table with FizX version 3 or higher, it's definitely a night and day. Old Future Pinball physics are no longer a thing. Basically, new tables with FizX, it's basically like using NFOSI physics on Visual Pinball. It's basically the equivalent on Future Pinball. And it's a night and day difference. Like a night and day. Like actually, Future Pinball now plays right up there with the best of them. And it's shocking to hear that, but it's true now. Like not as good as the absolute best on Visual Pinball, but just as good or better than regular Visual Pinball. And I actually do mean that. So, and I just answered this question. Yes, they can. If they have PhysX Physics 3.0 or higher, and it depends on how well the person updated the table. Not everyone does them the same. I hope I do a good job that people like. Other people may or may not do it the same way I do, but as a general rule, yes, they'll play better. Okay, so dual stage flippers. Okay, so this is a big one. Dual stage flippers is basically where you have buttons uh, that if you push them in halfway, it's your normal flipper buttons. But then if you push them in all the way, then it'll make the second set of flippers on the cabinet activate. So real pinball tables, some of them have that. Uh, Future Pinball actually does support that in the Future Pinball settings. The only problem is the table has to be coded to support it. So by default, it's not even an issue at all. So that's what the second flipper, the right second flipper options are here, okay, and as well in here. So Future Pinball supports it, but the table has to be coded to make use of it. PinEvent tables do support it, most of them. Not like the ones that actually make use of it and make sense to make use of it. I added that option in there, but you have to go into the table and enable that yourself. Okay, so you have to go into, like Sonic Pinball Mania supports it. So you have to go into table options near the top. And it'll be in here somewhere, second stage flippers, and you have to enable that. They're disabled by default because most people don't have them, right? And the other thing is you have to make sure that these are not set to the same as special. By default, they are. You can see A and A. They're both the same thing. So the problem is if you don't make your left second flipper a different key or button than special and special 2 for the right one, then you're going to have a lot of confusion because you're going to have things that were meant for the special 1 and 2, which are like your MagnaSave, both of them activating at the same time. And on PinEvent tables, that will confuse the living crap out of you. So make sure you go in here and set this as something separate as your MagnaSave. They cannot be the same thing because you'll have your MagnaSaves and your second flipper buttons activating at the same time. So I don't know why this is like that by default. It's very confusing. So yeah, like for example, like I would go in here and maybe set this, I don't know, to like maybe Y, and I'd set this to U and then make that work or whatever you want to do, right? But it's up to you, whatever you use on your cabinet. So yeah, that's what this is referring to. It can be very confusing. I want to make changes to the table's physics for my own preference. How do I do that? Well, in a FizX table, basically, near the top of the table, you scroll down until you get to the PhysX system, the PhysX table settings and code. So basically, this is where you would do that on a table that has PhysX. And the flipper settings are under the profile settings. So all of this is for the flipper settings if you want to adjust the physics. And you can do it for each flipper independently. You don't really do it much in the editor. Like by default, you'll leave the settings for the flipper alone in the editor. I mean, you can change some stuff. Let me see if I can. Okay, so if you click on the flipper, you're going to have elasticity and strength. I recommend leaving those alone. If you want, you can change the elasticity if you want. But beyond that, you're going to make the change in the table script here. Now, for other settings, that's going to be in the general settings, okay? So, for example, the table slope is set in here on PhysX tables. It's not set in the main... Here, hold on. I got to change a couple of things. It's not set in here anymore. So, whatever this is set at, it's ignored because PhysX will override that with whatever's in the settings here, okay? The reason why we do that is because then we can change this dynamically while we're playing if we ever need to for any reason. We don't need to normally. Or if while testing, you can use the PhysX tweaker tool. Then all the other settings are in here, like how sensitive your slingshots are, your targets, your scatter bounce settings for targets are all in here. And same thing for the rubbers, all the generic settings are in here, including the Future Pinball rubber settings in the editor. So let's see if I can find it. I don't know. I gotta find something that has rubber. Hold on. Give me a second here. So for example, if you click on a rubber item in Future Pinball, you'll have elasticity. You have 3 options. So that is these guys right here. Okay? That's what this is telling you. The other settings are for FizX items throughout the table, and that's going to be referring to anything in this section here. So normally you shouldn't be changing this at all, okay? But if there is any items in here, then you would change the number here to match what setting here, okay? Now, beyond that, all rubber items on a PhysX table that has 3.2 or higher, PhysX 3.2 or higher, it has to be that version. Then if you click on them, like this rubber here, for example, then you change this to whichever one you want to use. And that's going to refer, again, back to this, okay? So that's what that's all about. And then there's more advanced stuff here, but bottom line is it's all in this section here, okay? You want to make changes to bands, post-lighting, and post-processing and lighting, and when you do, the changes aren't kept. Okay, so this is going to be mostly on PinEvent tables, but some people may also do this as well. Bottom line is, when the table loads up, on PinEvent tables, I have those settings manually set in the table script, okay? The reason why is because I need very specific settings to allow all the lighting to work the way it works. If I don't do that, then the table will look like crap is the bottom line. But I do, on my newer table updates, have the two main options for ambient lighting and diffusion lighting in table options in the table script. So you can make these, you can adjust these for what you want. So that way this will then use your settings when the table starts up. Because the bottom line is, when you make the changes to your band menu for lighting, that's saved to the table config file, but the table script always overrides that. So if someone adds that in the table script, then whatever you change doesn't matter because it's going to be overridden anyway. And that's going to be in this section here, the set light parameters and BAM, and all those are saved here if someone does that in the table script, okay? So just so you know, this is what you're looking for to try to manually change those settings yourself. Okay, so I know it's a little confusing, but that's the bottom line. So if you have a table that has an FF init error, well, that's DOF links, basically. The table was made for DOF links, and you don't have the DOF links VBS file that the table requires. If you installed my package, my Essentials All-in-One package, then you shouldn't have that problem because you should have the latest DOF links VBS file in there anyway, all right? But if you don't, then double check to make sure you have that file in there. And it has to be the newest up-to-date version, which I do include. All right, do I need VR-specific tables to play Future Pinball VR? No, because Future Pinball from day one was designed with 3D environments in mind. So there's always a VR room in every Future Pinball table, technically. Even if you don't see one, there's technically always one there. And the whole table, the cabinet and everything, every table has that, no matter what. So yes, every table can play in VR, and every table will have a Backbox, and every table will be complete. Is the bottom line. It's not like Visual Pinball where you have to have tables made specifically to support VR capability. Future Pinball, every single table automatically works with full capability and full features in VR. Is the bottom line. And you can read more about that in my BAM OpenVR guide. All right, so Pinup Player. All right, so a lot of the problems with Pinup Player are what I described earlier with Future Pinball, Windows Defender and all that. It's the same. A lot of the same stuff rehashed. Make sure you have the latest version of Pinup Player. Right now it's 1.5, so make sure you're up to date on that. And do not install VLC Media Player on your system because the one in the Pinup Player folder is the one that needs to be used, and it does use that version in that folder, but some of the global settings from VLC are used for every VLC. So if you install a separate VLC on your system, it may screw up or cause problems. So just keep that in mind. And then just all the generic Pinup Player issues, just go through and make sure everything here is sorted. Okay, so this is a good one. So you're using a new updated PinEvent V2 table. So let's say you got a newer Sonic Pinball Mania table, but then now the PuP-Pack is no longer working, but the older table worked just fine. Well, make sure you have both, not just a new table, but also the newest PuP-Pack that's included with the table. You have to install it every time to be absolutely sure you're using the up-to-date one, because what happens is the tables do a check for the PuP-Pack to make sure, because sometimes I update both of them and they can be drastically different. So therefore, I'm not going to have it use the older version because that's going to just run it's not going to run correctly. So I have all my tables do a check for the PuP-Pack to make sure it's the one that's needed for that table. Now the version it checks for is going to be in your PuP-Pack folder. So when the table starts up, it's going to check this file here that's in the PuP-Pack folder, and it's going to check to see what is in here. Okay. Now keep in mind this number 1.8. That doesn't mean the table version. Sometimes the table may be a higher version. It may be like 1.9, but the PuP-Pack it needs is 1.8. So I usually don't make a change to this unless I've updated the PuP-Pack for any reason, and then you need the newer version of the PuP-Pack. So just bottom line, make sure you have the newest PuP-Pack that comes with the table, okay? And do not mix the files from the old and new. So don't copy and paste into the same folder. Remove the old PuP-Pack and install the new one from scratch, and then go in here and set your PuP-Pack option, okay? It's very important that you do that. All right. Because if you don't, then it won't load the PuP-Pack. And if you run it in debugger, like I showed earlier, then it will tell you that you are using the wrong PuP-Pack version, and it will tell you what version it's looking for. So that's another instance where that debugger can save you a lot of time. Okay, so you want to be able to play PinEvent V2 tables with PuP features or one without. So the bottom line with this is all you got to do is make a copy of the table, and then on the copy of the table, you don't want to have PinEvent features enabled. You just want it to be plain Jane Future Pinball and nothing else. Then all you got to do is set this to false, and then it'll disable everything manually. And then you can have both tables and both features without having to switch it back and forth over and over and over again. All right, so that's what you do there. So PuPDMD problems. So PuPDMD. So the PuP-Pack that displays. If the fonts don't look right, they look squished or tall or skinny or something doesn't look right. Well, you have to make sure you're set to a 16:9 resolution in your PuP displays. So what are we talking about with that? Well, we're talking about making sure that when you set up your PuP displays, that you have them, and I'll bring this one in here, you have it set to 16:9. So if you have this on your other screens, your cabinet screens, or if you have it on your single screen setup, depending on what you're using, you have to make sure you click ratio 16:9, and then it's using a 16:9 resolution. Because if you don't do that, then the fonts won't scale correctly, is the bottom line, okay? So you have some weird text showing up like this for some reason instead of normal text. Well, then that means you're using a very old version of Pinup Player, so you need to make sure that you're updated to 1.5 or higher. You installed PinEvent Light Table, and there's no full DMD with text and videos. Yeah, because there are none. A PinEvent Light Table does not have those features. The only thing you can do is use DMDExt to mirror the Future Pinball DMD. Because there is no PuPDMD feature. That's the whole point of a PinEvent Light Table. That's a feature that will come later on, and then when it has that feature, it's no longer a light table, it's a PinEvent V2 table. So that's why. So PuP SSF isn't working. Well, make sure you're fully updated with the newer version of PinEvent or Pinup Player. Make sure you have the new PuP-Pack installed for the table, like I mentioned before, because if you don't, the PuP-Pack won't get loaded, and then you get no SSF. All right, and then make sure you actually have the PuP-Pack installed at all, because if you don't, then you'll have no sounds playing. So, All right. So, oh, and the other thing is, Future Pinball sound levels are much, much louder than PUP SSF. So what you may have to do is you may have to reduce when you start playing the game, and you have to do this for each table. It's not a global setting. You use home end and page up and page down keys, or whatever you've assigned for your game for your buttons in your controller to reduce the music level and the sound level in each table. Okay. Very common. A lot of people make that mistake. You don't have DOF with the table. Well, make sure you have the options actually enabled in PinEvent V2. They're disabled by default for VR and desktop. They're only enabled by default for cabinet. So make sure you double check that in case you're using it in those modes. Make sure that DOF links is not running. It has to not be running at all because it's going to try doing DOF as well, and then it's gonna interfere, and then it's not gonna work. The DOF from the pin event table is not gonna work correctly. Okay, and then I mentioned the error before about your DOF update or registration or a 64-bit update for Visual Pinball. Make sure that's not causing the problem. Okay, PUP stream. So that's when you run a table with a PuP-Pack, and then it streams the PuP-Pack from another monitor, another display into Future Pinball so that you can see the PuP-Pack in the actual table itself. Well, one, if you see the white images instead of the PUP streams like I had earlier, make sure you close Future Pinball completely. And if it happens again, just close Future Pinball completely and try again. Usually it clears it up just fine. The PUP streams show up as black instead of like anything. Well, that's going to be an issue where maybe one of your monitors is rotated compared to the others, and sometimes PUP stream won't work because it gets confused with the orientation. And if that's the case, there's nothing I can do to help you with that. So PUP stream works, but the displays are flipped. So yeah, that's an issue if your Future Pinball, or sorry, your display settings, like let's say you have your playfield monitor is set to flipped here instead of normal. Well, there's nothing I can do about that because the PUP stream plugin assumes you're using a normal orientation, and we can't change that. So there's nothing I can do about that. And these are the only, yeah, there's really not much we can do. Yeah. Sorry, not that, but where are we here? Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's best to have all your monitors and TVs set to normal, not to flip. Okay? If the table crashes when using PUP stream, well, it only works properly when you're normally hooked up, displaying it on your main graphics card, not a separate one, like an integrated one, for example. It doesn't like using motherboard ones usually, and sometimes they tend to cause a crash. Like integrated Intel, for example. Uh, you may have something running, like a background app that's causing it to crash. It's very possible. Like things like MSI Afterburner or things with overlays or things like that that are running in the background may cause a problem. And if you can't resolve the problem, then you have to disable it. There's nothing else I can do about it. So DMDExt. Okay, so this is common. So if you're running DMDExt for mirroring the Future Pinball DMD, well, these are the common problems. Some tables just won't work because they don't have the extra code for the second DMD that gets mirrored. So the only way you could do that is to rename the DMD in the translate editor. So now Sonic doesn't have this problem, but you'd have to go to the translate editor, and then you'd have to find the HUD DMD, and then you'd have to basically change that so that it's rendered as a normal DMD like this one here, and then you have to give it the same name. So that way the table code would then refer to this one, and then DMDExt will then mirror this DMD instead. Yeah, that's the bottom line. Some tables have a slim DMD, so 128 by 16, and that won't work, or it won't work correctly. So all you got to do is you just go in here and then you make sure it's not that, but it's actually this here, 128 by 32, because that's what it's looking for. On some tables like Robocop, the background images and it's corrupt, yeah, that's normal. It's there's nothing we can do about that. You know, it's the way the images get translated, and yeah, there's nothing we can do to fix that. Some tables, oh, so any table that's a gas segment display, so like you know, the alphanumeric segmented display, they won't work because they're not DMD. DMDExt mirrors a DMD from Future Pinball, nothing else. You know, so because people get confused because in Visual Pinball that does work, but that's because VPinMAME has its own internal thing where it converts alphanumeric displays into a DMD display. So on Future Pinball, unless the table has a DMD, then you can't mirror it. And then you're still having problems trying to get it to work. Well, if you ran anything as administrator, that tends to cause a problem. Or if there's anything on your system restricting it, that can cause a problem. So bottom line is you should have nothing running as a administrator, whether it be DMDExt or Future Pinball. You know, and if you're still having a problem there, then there's something else going on your system that's restricting it. BAM OpenVR. So I actually did a good job of going through this in my BAM OpenVR video, but the bottom line is there's a lot of extra issues that can come up. The one that's common is you have to make sure that the mode in the BAM menu is set to OpenVR, not like a Happy Cam or Happy Cab or Static Cam or anything else. So basically, you go into that menu and you cycle it until you get to OpenVR, and that usually solves that problem. You also have to make sure that Force Arcade mode is on an add-ons menu for that to work. And you may just need to exit and restart Future Pinball after making those changes for it to actually work. And it seems that you think it's working, but you can't see anything in your VR headset. Well, one, try looking around. It may actually just be your orientation. Push the home reset key for BAM, which is F12 by default. That will recenter your view. Try bringing up the BAM menu with a tilde or Q just to see if you can have it pop up. And then that may allow you to fix things that way. Or you may need to reset your view in the VR headset. Now, one other thing is, I don't have it on here, is make sure you click into the Future Pinball window. Sometimes Steam VR will bring Future Pinball out of focus, and then, therefore, it's waiting for Future Pinball to get back into focus before the table will appear. So just take your mouse and click back into the Future Pinball window, and then the table will eventually appear maybe seconds later, So that's very, very common. You feel like there's a delay in the head movement? Well, the latency settings is usually in the BAM menu, the solution for that. And the table plays smooth, but you want to get rid of the jaggies? Well, just read through here. There's lots of settings that you can do to try to get that to work better. And, oh, crap, we're at the end. Okay, I didn't realize we're at the very end of this sucker. Okay, well, there you go. I mean, there's a lot, but it's not too crazy. Those are the common ones. There may be other things I haven't covered in here. I can't cover everything, but those are the most common issues that tend to come up. So I hope that's been helpful. If you're having issues, go through the setup again. Reinstall my BAM settings files. That's usually the most common one. The biggest problems are by far Windows Defender and security restricting things. Windows-related problems, not Future Pinball itself. And that's also with Visual Pinball as well. Defender is the biggest evil. It restricts Visual Basic script commands. It'll cause tables to stutter, and that's Future Pinball and Visual Pinball. So my recommendation is try to disable Defender if you can and use a different antivirus. If you have to use something, at the very least, make sure you have exclusions set for Future Pinball, the entire folder. And if you have other apps as well, like if you use Baller Installer, I would recommend the entire vPinball folder being excluded for Defender and your antivirus, because it's going to cause problems for Future Pinball, it's going to cause problems for Visual Pinball, it's going to cause, especially for PUP, it's going to cause problems for that, and if it causes problems for that, well then it's also going to cause problems for both of these as a result. And it may cause problems for DOF as well. So yeah, that's the big one. Once you have that sorted, then make sure you're using my BAM settings files. If you're not sure, go back into here and just reinstall them. You can do this anytime you want. Do it for which setting you're, what you're using for desktop or cabinet. Make sure you're using the right one. If you're using it for VR, you copy these, and that goes into the BAM OpenVR instead, not the regular BAM. And same thing, if you have tables installed and you have config files or other things like that, make sure you're putting them into the right folder. Pancake mode goes in here, VR mode goes in there. Okay, so yeah, just keep track of what you're doing. Beyond that, I think those are the biggest issues. And then make sure you're actually running BAM. Make sure you're only running from here. You're never ever running this. Okay, if you're running in VR, you're only going to be running this. You're never ever running this. And if you're using these batch files will run these for you. But remember that these also make permanent make settings to Future Pinball settings in the registry. So if you need something different, make sure you edit this and go through the settings and make sure everything's the way you want it to be. Okay? Except for this section. Don't change these ones. Those have to stay the same. Okay? And you can make your own copy of any of these and then customize it however you want anyway. And you can make a shortcut to any of these if you have to. But just make sure these are in the main Future Pinball folder. And if you have any questions, well, read this file. It tells you everything you need. Okay? Has every command you could ever want in there to change any setting. So yeah, I think that's all I need to go through now. That's been quite a bit. So I hope that's been helpful. Can answer a lot of the most common questions that people run into. So thanks for watching this video. I hope you watched the entire series and they were helpful for you if you needed to. Actually, I kind of hoped you didn't have to watch any of the series because everything ran great for you from the beginning. But if you didn't, I hope these videos and the guides were helpful. Go to them first. They will answer most of your questions before you have any problems. And they'll help you to understand how Future Pinball and BAM runs and how the tables run. And then that way you'll have a better understanding of how to change things the way you need to for your particular setup. Because not everyone's the same, right? My setup may be different than yours. My features that I want may be different than yours. So it's important that you understand how this stuff works. And that's why I make these guides. It doesn't take long to set up Future Pinball. It really doesn't. But understanding how to change it for your particular needs, that's going to take time, and that's the case with Visual Pinball, Future Pinball, a front end, Pinup Popper, Pinup Player, all of it. It's not hard to set up. It's just everyone has very specific needs, and that's why Virtual Pinball is kind of a confusing pain in the ass. Because if everyone was stuck to only one set of settings, well then that would be easier, but then you'd be stuck. You wouldn't be able to change things the way you like. So, you kind of have to take both things with it. You can't have it both ways. So, okay, no more ranting. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoy everything these guides have helped you with, and I hope you enjoy all the latest PinEvent tables and other Future Pinball tables being updated for FizX as well. More is coming, guys. So thanks for watching these videos. See you in another video. Bye.